YouTube right now.
I can see it on YouTube. So I see Jeff in the upper right corner and then the slide cycling.
Thanks, Patty. Well, we're going to wait about 1 more minute before we get started. Let a few more folks get in through the waiting room. All right, well, welcome everyone to the Transfer Student Leadership Summit. Depending on where you are, it might be good morning or good afternoon. So thank you for joining us. My name is Jeff Mayo. I'm the Assistant Director of the First Year Experience at the University of Texas at Austin. And we are so thankful for everyone here joining us today. This event, as you can see from some of these pictures, has traditionally been held on our campus as a 2-day event with about 40 or 50 people. As of yesterday, we hit over 500 registered for this event now that we've shifted online. So we're really excited about this opportunity to reach more students and the staff and faculty who support them. But you might be thinking to yourself, what exactly did I sign up for here? Someone I work with forwarded me this link and I put my name down. And so we just want to tell you a little bit more about this. This event really is designed for transfer student leaders who want to improve the transfer experience on their campuses. We also have a lot of information that applies to faculty, staff, administrators who are interested also in the transfer experience. And so we are excited to have you all here. And some of the objectives that we always try to meet, this is our 4th year of having the event, we always keep these in mind, is that we want to spread new ideas, share new ways to think about transfer, how to support transfer on your campus. We want to amplify student voices, help students' voices reach new audiences. We'll do that today through the use of polls, through chats, through presentations. And later sessions, our March 29th and April 19th sessions, we'll even have some opportunities for breakout sessions where you can talk directly to students from across the country. We also want to make sure that we are building a proud, informed network of transfer students. Many of you signed up for our networking list, so we're excited to connect you in that way. We also hope that you use this time in session to connect through the chat function, also to use our hashtag on social media of #TransferSummit. And then finally, we want to give students the experience of being at a professional or at least a semi-professional experience of a conference. And so we're really excited to have that opportunity as well. So our official theme for this particular session is transfer themes and issues. However, we do have some unofficial themes that are kind of what are guiding us throughout the 3 different sessions, across the whole summit. One is to be the change. Transfer students are their own best advocates. This is not to replace the work that staff and faculty administrators should be doing on your campus. But we just know that our experience at UT Austin and at many of the schools that I've been able to connect with, transfer students really are the ones who make change on their campus. And then also, knowledge is power. The knowledge that you have as a transfer experience, your particular experience gives you that knowledge base. But this is an opportunity where you can learn about other students' experiences. Excuse me. I was a transfer student myself, but every day I work with transfer students and I learn more and more about the diversity of transfer experiences. One kind of story I wanted to share, this is a story from a show a while back, but it is a man falls into a hole. It's very steep. He can't get out. He sees a doctor walk by and he yells out to the doctor, "Can you please help me get out? Anything you can do." The doctor writes a prescription and throws it down into the hole and keeps on walking. About 20 minutes later, a priest walks by and he's like, "Father, please, is there anything you can do? I need some help." The priest writes down a prayer, throws it in the hole, and keeps walking down the street. About 20 minutes later, he sees his friend Joe. He's like, "Joe, please, what can you do? Got to help me out." And before he knows it, Joe jumps down into the hole. He's like, "Joe, what are you doing? Now we're both stuck down here." And Joe says, "I've been down here before and I know a way out." And that's kind of how I see transfer students and you as transfer student leaders is you've been through this experience before. And maybe someone helped you out with a ladder. It might've been a mentor. It might've been an orientation experience. It might've been a student org. It might've been a faculty member who reached out to you. But for everyone, it's different. And for some people, it takes multiple tries to get out of that hole. But you've been down there. Your voice is important. Your experience is important. And hopefully by the end of the session today, you'll see some examples of why it's important and how students have used their voice to make change on their campuses. So speaking of the diversity of transfer experiences, these are just a handful of the different categories that might be different. Everyone has a different motivation for transferring. Everyone's is a little bit different. How you identify as being part of your campus community, the number of institutions you attended, so on and so on. So these are just some things that you might not consider. We all know our own transfer experiences really well, but when you're listening to other transfer students, just keep some of these in mind that they might have very different reasons for transfer and very different experiences pre and post transfer than yours. But what we'd like to do at this point is hear from y'all. So we're going to do a word cloud. We're going to pull this up to see it kind of populate live. But some of the questions that we want you to keep in mind are, we'll have two different slides. One's about points of friction and one's about what worked. So for points of friction, where were the bumps in the road? What slowed you down in your transfer process or your success once, post-transfer? So these are some things to keep in mind. And so if you can pull up your phone or another window and go to menti.com, that's MENTI.com. You can see the code is 376816. Let me share my screen to show you these results as they come in. And so if you can pull up your phone or another window. Okay, let's see.
Do you mind repeating the code for us?
Once I get the new one up, you'll see the code as well. All right. So some of these coming in quickly, connection seems to be said multiple times. Limited funding I see popping up. Credit and transferability of credit. We see community. Imposter syndrome, that's one that I definitely connect with as a transfer student. Funding, that's a big one that we hear a lot across all sorts of institutions. Making friends and belonging. So what I find really interesting, and please continue to put your answers in, is that you see a range of challenges. You each had 3 kind of opportunities to put in an answer, and I see academic reasons, I see personal reasons, I see financial reasons, I see social reasons. There's a lot of challenges that come along with being a transfer student. And so I thank you for sharing with us. Let's move to the next screen. I don't think I can do it here. Let's see. Let me go back real quick. See if we can. Let's hear what's been most helpful in your experience. This could be a person, an office, a program, a mindset, a habit you developed. What has kind of helped propel you towards your goals and your success post-transfer or even pre-transfer? Family's a big one. That's great. I'm seeing a lot of people being mentioned, so advisors and mentors. Some specific services like orientation and tutoring services. Empathy has been mentioned multiple times. I love the shout out to advisors and Tau Sigma, the Transfer National Honor Society. So it seems like this is a lot of not only support services or technical services like tutoring, but it's also family, it's connection, it's friends, it's transfer communities like Tau Sigma that are really making a difference for students. So this is really amazing to see. I appreciate everyone who participated. So let's move back over to the PowerPoint. This last one, I kind of wanted to do in the chat. And so I hope that y'all can Put some of your answers in the chat, whether you're in Zoom or you're on the YouTube live stream. Transfer pride. We want to hear what you're most proud about in being a transfer. Transfer students have a lot of reasons. You know, one of the slides at the opening, you may have noticed that it's more competitive to get into institutions as a transfer student than as a first-time college student. And so you've made it through a really competitive process. Some of you have probably transferred more than once. That's very common as well. So let's check out what some of y'all's answers have been. Let's see. Overcoming imposter syndrome, meeting new transfer students, being a first gen, graduated due to transfer. That's amazing. Yeah, networking. Completing a graduate studies, completing my doctorate. That's amazing. Congratulations on that. Being online in first gen. Yeah, in particular this year, we have a lot of students who are, you know, taking fully online experiences. And so again, thank y'all for sharing that. That's definitely something to be proud about. So please continue to use the chat. It's going to be there the whole time. We want y'all to connect, ask each other questions. When you hear a presenter talk about something that resonates with your experience, we hope that you'll add to it in the chat and kind of use that as a way to connect with folks. You know, we didn't want to recreate a 2-day in-person experience where there's a lot of those types of interactions. We all experience Zoom fatigue, it's real, but we want to use chat and some, you know, continuing the conversation on social media with the hashtag transfer summit to continue those conversations. A few community agreements right before we jump into our first section, our expert panelist. Please keep your microphones muted unless you're speaking. We might have some opportunities for you to ask questions by taking off your mute, but let's keep that at a minimum for now. Take a moment to make sure that your name and pronouns are correctly displayed if that's something that you have on your Zoom feature. Just remember that together we know a lot, but just be open to creating a space for a range of experiences and viewpoints. You know, we want you to hear your truth, but we want you to understand the viewpoint of others as well. Let's see. And then finally, we just want to quickly mention, we will have a drawing for some Apple AirPods. We're really excited to give away. We'll do that at each of these summit sessions. And so make sure that you register before the end of our student presentation from our peer advocates from UC Berkeley. Like I mentioned before, hashtag transfer summit, you can see pictures from previous summits or connect with folks who are at the current one. Any issues with technical support, please email those to the email that we've been providing this whole time, which is the fye.ga@austin.utexas.edu. That email address is in your registration emails as well. And finally, if for some reason you leave the Zoom or you have any issues with Zoom itself, it might just be easier to check it out on YouTube Live. That is also in your registration email. So let's jump right in with our expert panelists. When we came up with we wanted a kind of an introductory theme for the first session. So we went with transfer themes and issues, and there really were the first two people that came to my mind are the folks that we have here today. We're so thankful to have them take the time to be on our panel. And that's Janet Marling. Dr. Marling is the executive director of the National Institute for the Study of Transfer Students. She has written and edited many works on transfer student experiences. She works with institutions on consulting about the transfer experiences. And so she really is a national expert on all things transfer. We also have Dr. Barbara Tobolowsky from the University of Texas at Arlington, associate professor. She has written about transfer students amongst other student populations. I believe it was in 2012. She wrote a piece that really had an impact on me and on folks that I know I've read it as well, called rationalizing neglect and institution response to transfer students. And so please join me in welcoming Dr. Marling and Dr. Tobolowsky. Thank you for being here today. Let me see if I can ask you to unmute. Let's see. All right, are y'all?
So.
There we go. I think you're good to go, right?
Yep.
Perfect. All right. Well, I just kind of want to start off by asking you both, how did you end up in the transfer field?
Jeff, I'll go ahead and go. And I always say that transfer found me. I was not a transfer student. I am a proud alum of Texas Christian University, just up the road a piece from UT Austin. But when I started my professional career, I was in charge of new student and mentoring programs at the University of North Texas. And actually, that was kind of in a second iteration of my collegiate career, post-college career. And in my portfolio was transfer, and specifically oversaw orientation, mentoring programs, Tau Sigma, et cetera, in our office. And we brought in 7,000 transfer students through orientation every year, and 52 to 54% of our student body were transfer students as well. So it became a significant issue for us to ensure that we were doing the right thing by these students. And at that time, Dr. Benita Jacobs was our Vice President for Student Affairs. And she started asking those questions. Where can we go and learn? How do we know if we're doing the right things by these students? And not finding enough information that satisfied us, she decided we needed to start the National Institute for the Study of Transfer Students, and had our first convening on the Denton campus. 19 convenings later, here we are, and still talking about this really, really important issue. So I would say it found me. Now, I did have a brother who was a transfer student, and back then we would not necessarily have use those words. I think he probably was just somebody that moved around between institutions. Now we'd call him a swirler. He started at a private institution in Nebraska, moved to a 2-year institution in California, and back to a public institution in Oklahoma. So he was one of those very typical students doing this more than one time. 7 years and 2 degrees later, he was a very successful transfer student. So I think in the big picture of things, transfer's always been a part of my life. I just didn't know it.
It's interesting that you say that. I was a summer swirler, I guess, that every summer I would take a course somewhere else just for convenience, wherever I was, what I was working, whatever, to help me. But I never thought of myself as a transfer student because I was just taking those summer courses. But I have transcripts from a lot of different places. The way I found transfer, or transfer found me, was when I got my job as Associate Director of the National Resource Center for the First Year Experience in Students in Transition. I think I was on the job for 1 month, and there was a grassroots group that had formed on campus for faculty and staff who were interested in transfer students. And Stuart Hunter, who was the director of the center at that time, said, "Come with me to this meeting." And so I went with her and met all of these people that were concerned about transfer student success. And we started meeting regularly, and they had been meeting, and I joined them. And we learned about the different issues with different groups in different places on campus with transfer students. And we started doing research on those students, and because we needed to hear their voice. So I'm so excited they're transfer students here today, because they're the heart of this. You need to hear from them to know what's going on. And through that work, we started spreading the word about transfer students all across campus, and initially making small changes to try to help them succeed there.
That's really great. It's like you mentioned, you have long histories with transfer, and have been looking at, what helps students succeed post-transfer, which is exactly why we're here today. And just briefly, talking about student voices that Barbara mentioned, we will make those word clouds available. We should be able to do that so folks can kind of see what was said. And And we'll have recordings of this as well. So we'll be able to go back to it. But let's start off. Our first question is for you, Janet. I want to make sure I get this quote right. But during the closing session of the 2020 NISTS conference, you gave a great advice to a professional staff member who said, when you said, students can't just be at the center of what we do. They need to be seated at the center of the table when we have discussions around transfer student support. Can you speak more on the ways that having students at the table, or these days, having students take up a cube on the Zoom grid, can have an impact on decision makers on campus?
I love this question, Jeff. And again, welcome to all the students and the advisors who are on the call today and part of the webinar, because if we aren't working in concert and if we're not listening to our students, then we're really missing an opportunity to learn on both sides. So what I think about is I like to think about the fact that students think in your own minds what this means to you, but students lead with passion. And students, what are your passions? Like, what is it at your campus that you're really passionate about? It might be something that you see working really well, and it might be something that isn't working so well. So when that passion is coming at you as an administrator, sometimes it's incredibly refreshing, and sometimes it's incredibly overwhelming, because that passion then leads to lots of why questions. Why not? Why can't it be this way? And so we want to ensure that we're hearing those things coming from students, because it helps us kind of erase that cloud that we're in as administrators, even faculty, staff members, because I like to think about it from the standpoint of students are looking for the why can't it be this way? Why isn't it this way? Kind of looking at it from what's not there. Whereas institutional leaders are oftentimes coming to the table with looking at things from a fairness perspective. And so we really just have to kind of think about what that means, because both are really important perspectives. And it's critical then that both sides think about what that means in exchanging accurate information, as accurate as possible, not necessarily to persuade at first. And that's the hard part, because I know we all want to go in there and say, but this is why we think it is the way it is. But we need to have those really good conversations to educate one another, right? And then to have that willingness to listen truly with curiosity and empathy to figure out what's going on. Because by having students at the table, you're hearing those stories that Barbara just mentioned. And we can't expect that one individual being given a cursory seat at the table is enough, because that one student can't possibly represent all the interest of the students. There are more than one transfer student story that needs to be represented at your institution and at the table. So it's when students are invited into conversations meaningfully, intentionally, and with integrity, that they're given the floor to truly share what they know to be true, are the times when that exchange is meaningful. If you just have somebody at your meeting to say that you've checked a box, then you're not giving yourself the opportunity to really listen to what those students have to say. And we have many, many examples of, by listening to what the student perspective is, we're kind of woken up to things that we didn't know were happening, or maybe we weren't communicating in the right way. Too often we want to say students don't listen, or students don't read, or we've given them everything that they need to be successful. Why aren't they successful? And we're putting the onus on the students, when in reality, if we just ask the students would probably say, we don't learn that way, or we don't walk past that building, or heaven forbid, we don't check into that Zoom chat in the way that you might expect that we would. So let us tell you where we are. Let us tell you how to get in touch with us, and let us tell you what we need. We can't have it all, but maybe together we can figure out a good path.
And I love that you mentioned that about representation. When I was scrolling through who registered for the event today, I saw a number of students identify themselves as either transfer student government reps, so which implied to me that their student governments had spaces, just like UT Austin started a couple of years ago, just for transfer students. There's always transfer voices represented in student government, or their officers in a student government. And I'm curious to know if they are transfer student themselves, or they're just interested in learning more about transfer today. And so maybe they can jump on the chat and talk about their experience in student government. But thank you, Janet. Barbara, I have a question for you. So Dr. Jill Biden, First Lady of the US, is a community college professor, and she's always been an advocate for increasing access to community colleges. I believe most recently in the last week or two, there's been talk from the administration about making community college more accessible financially for all Americans. I was hoping to see if you have an opinion on if we would see any kind of a change in transfer enrollment because of the increase in community colleges, where a third of all students start their college careers. Because most recently we have seen a decline in transfer numbers. So I'm curious your opinion on where we might see things going.
This is so challenging for me to imagine a world where community college isn't critical, because it plays such an important role in so many students' college pathway. So all of the sort of declines that we're seeing, particularly the deep ones this year because of the pandemic, I can't imagine when we're going to recover, but I know we have to recover, that it's important for our students' success for community colleges to recover. There's an interesting article that came out of the National Clearinghouse in 2020 that reflected who was staying, who was traveling, what is the experience with transfer students. And I found the findings kind of surprising, that the returning students are going on and they're still continuing now, even with the pandemic. But if a student had stopped out at all in 2020, they were the ones that were not coming back. They weren't returning. And unfortunately, these are the groups that have been hardest hit by the pandemic. So you have students of color, you have low income students, all these students who struggle. Also, it was men were not coming back, and older students older than 30. So you figure they have a lot of responsibilities on their plate. It's always hard for them to keep going. We also know that when anybody stops out, that sort of makes their pathway harder to get to graduation, that they're challenged by that. But at the same time, I know what a critical role, as I say, community colleges play. So I know it'll come back. The pandemic is still a mystery to me. It's like, how long is it going to go? How long are we going to feel the effects of the pandemic? But I actually was pleased that students who were in the pipeline were continuing. They were transferring. So that to me is hope, that people still see community college as a pathway. But I think we have to get to the other side of the pandemic, and hopefully with the new administration that some of those disparities will be addressed and we'll see all students succeed with the help of community colleges.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, as you said, I cannot imagine a U.S. higher ed system that community colleges don't play such a critical role. And with students' intentions to eventually earn four-year degrees, you know, transfer must be a big part of that equation as well. So Janet, this could be in your role with NISTS or in your work with other institutions, but I know that NISTS always has student ambassadors each year, and they all have such amazing stories, personal stories and stories about what their schools do for transfer students. I was just hoping if you could maybe highlight one or two students that jumps out to you that would be a good representation of how students can kind of make a change on their campus.
Jeff, you're asking the impossible of me. You know that, right? Because these students are fantastic. And for those of you who don't know, we do have the honor of holding a national competition for folks to nominate students that they feel like would be representative of a transfer student ambassador. We select them in the fall, and then they represent us at our annual conference each year. And, you know, these people inspire me because we know that to be selected, they've overcome challenges. They have a very clear idea of where they're headed, And they also have a deep desire to help other transfer students. And so not only are the ones who are selected so very good at what they do, but also those in the honorable mention category are here. And, if you want to see highlights from somebody who's doing really great work, I encourage you to introduce yourself to Cheyenne Young, who's actually on the call and in the chat. She's doing some really amazing work at UCF related to encouraging the administration to value transfer students and to allocate resources accordingly. But it's so important that I say first and foremost that I want you to know that our TSAs are exceptional, but they are not the exception, because the students that we see that rise to our attention are just a smattering of the ones that we know who are out there. And many of you are listening to me talk to you right this very minute. So we know that you are proven scholars, that you are students who are persevering, with many, many, many challenges and many supports along the way. So if I could do this, Jeff, if you can indulge me and let me do this from a collective standpoint, there are kind of some lessons that I've learned from these folks. The first one is, don't ever let the challenges sideline you. And I say that because we've seen transfer student ambassadors who had scholarships to their most aspirational institutions, and then life happened. Family members get sick, financial situations change, and they have to come home. And sometimes they flounder. Sometimes they aren't able to continue in the way that they thought. So their trajectory has been altered. But what didn't change was their desire. They might have been confused at some certain time, but yet they persisted because whatever was going on around outside of them was not a match for what was going on inside of them and their motivation. So I just encourage you all to really look at it from that perspective. Don't let life's curveballs sideline you. The second thing that the TSAs have taught me is really use your circumstances and motivation to make things better for other people. I know so many of you on your campuses see things that you want to either elevate and make better because they're already off to a good start, or things that you wish were different. Use that motivation. We see that a lot with our TSAs. Maybe they didn't have a great first experience in college, and they use that motivation then to ask for what they needed for the second time around. And then I think the third thing that our TSAs bring kind of to light for me is find that person at your institution that really gets you, or that you want to know more about, or that trusts you, and spend intentional time learning about them. And what I mean is find that advisor that is in your corner, find that faculty member that is in your corner, find that administrator who said an extra hello to you, and give them a chance to get to know you on a personal level. You don't have to impress them. You just have to be you. And in saying that, they can't sponsor you. They can't help you reach your goals until they know you and know what you're all about and know the amazing person that you are. So take some risks, put yourself out there, and help those who want to be helpful to you to get to know you better. And that's what I think some of our TSAs have been really good at.
I think that's excellent advice, and I'm glad you've distilled that down from hearing from such exceptional students, as you put it. Barbara, that kind of leads into my next question for you, which is in your research, particularly the article "Rationalizing Neglect," you talk about colleges and universities when they consider whether or not to direct more resources to transfer students, that quote, perhaps the most significant pressure comes from the transfer students themselves. The sheer numbers mean that a unique population of students, will soon be too big to remain an afterthought on campuses. Do you have any, and you also go on in that article to talk about the folks on campus who do seem to have the most concern for transfer students were either transfer students themselves or someone they were close to as a transfer student. So it seems that once you get to know about the transfer experience and some of those unique challenges involved, that you have that empathy for that experience, and you want to see a proportional amount of resources going to those students. Do you have any particular advice for how a student can even raise awareness of transfer issues, since that seems to be the key to unlocking additional resources or creating a transfer receptive culture on campus?
It's a two-way street, and that study in particular, we talked to administrators, and they could be faculty, staff across campus that work for transfer students, and they all had very different experiences with students. And it led to very different experiences for the students themselves because of where these people were positioned across campus. I think students have to make their voices heard, but I think it's very hard sometimes for transfer students to know what to ask, to know who to talk to, because sometimes other studies have talked about feeling stigma and feeling uncomfortable to voice anything because they feel like that was not an appropriate question to ask. And that's why support plays such a critical role. So I think we've already talked about it, the value of peer leadership, and for students who have experience transfer themselves to reach out to students. Transfer centers are incredibly valuable for that as well, to have a place for students to go to ask those questions, to voice it to your advisor, because good advising is so critical to student success. So like, again, to be brave and to tell the advisor like where your questions are and what you don't understand, because good advising can be the difference between continuing and not continuing. Financial aid offices play such a critical role because finances play a critical role throughout the student's experience. So you need to let them know what's a question, what's a problem. More recently, sometimes it's hard for transfer students if they come from out of state, because there's paperwork that needs to be turned in. And if they are out of state, for some reason, institutions often lose things, even if it's emailed, they just lose it. So I've talked to so many students who talked about the need to drive there and hand it in, or to send it to their parent so their parent could go to campus and do it. And it was so stressful for them. And it was just their admissions paper, their financial aid work, whatever it is. So as a student, it's to voice your concerns, to not be afraid to do it, to speak up, to find that peer, to find that support wherever it is, and let them know, because institutions intend to help all their students, but sometimes the rules just make it impossible for them to do it. Sometimes advisors have such heavy loads so that they don't consider it. Ignore that, sorry. And so I think just to be brave and to speak up, because that's the most important thing for a student, to be able to get their answers. I'll put mute on.
No problem. And that reminds me, Barbara, of one of the pieces of the word cloud that popped up was this idea of the most helpful thing that students put. A number of them wrote confidence. And I think that speaks to this idea that confidence that you belong. Isabella in the chat wrote about transfer stigma, which is something that Catherine Hartman, one of Next Summit Sessions panelists, she and I presented on that at NISTS last week, is about not only this outward stigma that you get from external forces, but the inward, almost imposter syndrome, lack of confidence that you have sometimes as a transfer student. And so having that confidence to raise your voice when you do have a concern, and I think also just the awareness that, as you write in your article, that transfer students are a significant population at many institutions. And it's, if you can raise your collective voices, it's much harder to ignore when you have an organization of transfer students that are speaking up and making people aware of their concerns. So
such good points, yes.
And so we're kind of towards the end of our time for the panel, but I do want to give our panelists one more kind of opportunity to give any kind of advice that you might have just for a transfer student leader, maybe someone who doesn't know where to start to make change on their campus. What thoughts do you have for that student who wants to really start off on transfer support at their institution?
I think for me, if a student is really wanting to institute change, I think you have to need to look at it from 3 perspectives. Like, know what it is that your priority is. Be really clear on what it is that you want to see and what you're thinking about wanting to do. And if you're not entirely clear, it's okay. Help seek out somebody who can talk with you about it, help you clarify that message. And then when you're working with the institution, make sure that you have done your homework. Like, find out what is actually going on in the arenas on your campus that have to do with the issue that you're wanting to pursue. You don't ever want to go into conversation and not know what's already out there. So know a little bit about that. And then the word we keep throwing around today is empathy. And I can't express that enough. It's not only having empathy for one another, but having empathy for the institution. The pandemic is really wreaking havoc on lots of folks. So we don't know, we can't even pretend to know what's happening in decision makers' minds and students' minds. So it's really, really important to come to the table with an open heart and an open mind for those conversations.
I
Barbara.
think, transfer populations are so diverse. You listed a lot of reasons, one of your early slides, but there are others because of age and background and experiences. They're so vast, and institutions sometimes can't get their arms around it because there's such a diverse population. So oftentimes institutions don't deal with it because it doesn't affect rankings and it's just too big to deal with. They don't quite know how. So they end up dealing with segments of it, those that are commuters or something. So find your champions on campus that do show you the support that you need. They can be faculty, they can be staff, they can be advisors, they can be anywhere on campus. Make your issues known, talk to them, and the more people that get involved in it, the more likely you are to have your needs met. That's what happened in South Carolina. This grassroots group came together and it made a difference. So I highly recommend doing that. It doesn't have to be top down. It could be student-based, getting these other champions with them to help and make some change on the campus.
That really resonates with my experience, and I'm glad you mentioned that. And as during the opening at NISTS last week, we talked a lot about transfer as a equity issue, and like you mentioned, transfer is more likely to be racial, ethnically diverse, older students, parents, veterans. So when your institution seems to be under-resourced for transfer students, that really means they're under-resourced for students with military experience, for parents, for older students. And so you get to bring those groups together and let them understand that this is an important population. So, well, I want to thank you both for your time, not only today, but in preparing for today. Just keeping one eye in the chat room this whole time, it really seems that what you're saying has really inspired people to think of transfer in different ways, and hopefully inspired some action back on college, their institutions. So again, thank you so much. Hope you stick around, but understand if you need to take off. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So at this point, I'm going to kick it over to Angeles de Santos Quezada from our Transfer Year Experience Program. And she is going to introduce the next segment of this session.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Marlene and Dr. Tobolowsky. That was a great presentation. Please help me welcome Diana, Grecia, and Angie with a round of virtual claps. They are from UC Berkeley, and they are peer advocate leaders for the Transfer Student Center at their institution. The Transfer Student Center is considered one of the leading transfer centers nationwide and the first in the UC systems. We are really, really happy to have these amazing students here today to share more about their leadership, their student support, and their transfer stories. So with that, I will pass it to Angie, who will be sharing their presentation with us. And once again, thank you so much, Angie, Diana, and Grecia. We are really happy to have you all here.
Hello, everyone. Can you all see my screen? Yeah, okay. So hello, everybody. I'm Angie. I'm here on behalf of UC Berkeley's Transfer Center, and we'll tell you a little bit about our center. So just to give you a brief overview of what we're going to be going through today, we'll be doing introductions, we'll be spotlighting statistics, tell you a little bit about what CE3 is, which is the umbrella that we fall under. We'll play a little transfer video for you. We'll focus on programs that we offer at the center, specifically what is a PAL and a PA and how you can incorporate that in your institution, what is the new launched volunteer program, as well as our transition courses, and a portion will be dedicated to questions and answers. If you have any questions, you can always drop them down in the chat. If they're not being answered, most likely they'll be answered in our slides. So we'll go ahead and get started with our introductions from our student staff.
Hi, everyone. My name is Grecia. So I'm a fourth year studying political science and minoring in Chicano studies. I'm a peer advocate lead for the volunteer program at the Transfer Center in UC Berkeley, which I'll get more into later. I'm also a member of EOP student, a reentry student, and I'm also a student parent.
Hi, everybody. My name is Yana. I am a fourth year Chicano studies major, and I serve as a peer advocate for the transition course team, which we'll be talking about later today. And I utilize EOP services at the university.
Hello, everyone. I'm Angie. I use the She series or AYA. I'm a fourth year sociology major with a minor in education. I'm a peer advocate lead of the outreach team at the center, meaning I do social media, newsletters, and things like that to get folks into the center. I'm also part of student support services, which we'll learn a little bit later, EOP, and I am also a reentry student. So before we jump into our center and what we offer, we want to tell you a little bit of our statistics. So who actually attends Cal? So we're going to compare traditional students with transfer students. So first year retention rate for transfer students is 95% compared to freshmen, which is 97%. Graduation rates for transfer students in 2016 within 4 years was 91%, and entering freshmen within 6 years was 92%. So not much of a difference besides the years. Application and acceptance rate in 2019. So for transfer students, there was 19,000 plus apps with almost 5,000 admins, leaving us at a 26% admittance rate. For freshmen, it was 87,000 plus apps and 14,000 plus admits with a 16.4% rate. So you can definitely see the difference between a transfer student and a freshman. Jumping into more statistics about our transfer students is the average GPA for transfer students when coming in is a 3.71 and a 4.0. In 2020, there was 20,000 applications. We had 4,000 admits, leaving us at 20%. And in 2019 was 19,000 with 4,000 applicants, with 4,000 admits, I'm sorry, and 25% acceptance. So you can see the big jump from one year to the next. And 95.1% of those applicants and admits were California community college students. 3% were veterans and 14.4% were reentry students like myself. So what is CE3? So CE3 is basically the umbrella in which the Transfer Center falls under, and it is the Centers for Educational Equity and Excellence, and respects every undergraduate as a unique individual and works to ensure the equity of experience so that all UC Berkeley students can thrive. So it is part of the equity and inclusion subdivision, and which is where CE3 falls under. So there are three different kind of like umbrellas of what falls under, three different categories in which falls under CE3. So the first one is access and opportunity programs, which is EOP, undocumented student program, and POSSE, which starts off with students who are still in high school. The following is independent student programs, subcluster, which is the veteran service, reentry student parents, underground scholars and Hope Scholars. And lastly, we have the transfer student program subcluster, which houses our transfer student center, our student support services, and our Miller Scholars. So we're gonna go ahead and do a quick temperature check, see where you're all out. So give me 1 second to bring that up. Okay, if you all want to take out your phones, go ahead and go on mentimeter.com and just describe your transfer experience in 1 word or 2 words. I think there's an option for 2 words.
So I see a couple words popping up on our screens. Some people are sharing that their experience was disappointing, it was disorganized, overwhelming, competitive. Definitely feel that one. Lonely. Difficult, confusing. And these are all valid experiences that you're all sharing. And if I may share about my own experience, I know that when I came to Cal, I definitely struggled with imposter syndrome, and it's one of those things that's ongoing for myself. But I think that over time, as I became exposed to the Transfer Student Center and the community there, that feeling of not belonging there at Cal, over time didn't feel that way anymore. I also see exciting. Okay, that's a turnaround. And stressful. Awesome. Thank you for sharing, everybody.
So we're going to go ahead and move on to the next one, if it will work. Okay. Oh. Okay, so if you could describe your community in 1 word, since we're going to be jumping into community and what that means for us, we want to know what you feel and how you describe it.
So I see support and collaboration. Those are definitely big. Confusing, welcoming, engaging, connection. Shameless plug, but for me, it was definitely the Transfer Center that was my community. I felt so lost on campus. And as you all saw with the C3 subcluster, I fit into many different categories, but it wasn't until I went into the Transfer Center that I really felt heard and understood. So connection is definitely important when we're talking about community. And it helps deal with imposter syndrome, which is something that Diana mentioned earlier, because you're with people that are just like you, and it helps validate you being there in the space that you're there. Diverse, belonging, home away from home, definitely. I really like that one. Yeah, connection is huge and welcoming.
Nice. So we're hearing all this wonderful, all these wonderful sort of like what you think about what community is. So we're going to go ahead and jump into what community is for us and how that looks like at our center. So give me 1 second to present this. Can you all see the screen? Okay.
My first experience with the Transfer Center was even before I got into Berkeley. So I was part of a starting point mentorship program, and I was connected to a chemistry major who was also a transfer student. And she had helped me figure out what major I should apply to best, what classes I should be looking to. And even right when I got in, she had sent me a whole email of information of like, oh, this is what you should be doing to make your transition from community college easier.
My first experience with the Transfer Center was during GBO, and our group stopped here because we were a transfer group, and automatically I felt welcomed. Everyone there was smiling and yelling, come to the Transfer Center. My first stop there in GBO, they were promoting the transition course, and I thought, hey, like this is a really good way for me to get acclimated to the school.
My first experience with the Transfer Center was actually one of the transition courses offered during fall of 18. Stephen Wynn was actually my instructor. One day towards the end of spring semester, I was like, hey, how do I get more involved on campus? and he opened up a position for me as a peer advocate, told me to apply and everything, and I got in.
So Berkeley's always been my dream school for me. So when I got accepted, it was a no-brainer. I had to make it happen in terms of coming over here. I think this is one of the first places that I came in terms of like, hey, where's this building? What do I do with classes?
The transition course does a really good job of bringing resources to you. There's the community itself that the transition course builds. Every time I'd walk in the transfer center, someone in my course was there and was always willing to just say hi and sit with me or study together, talk about how we were doing.
Something that we don't advertise really, I think, is that you find your community in there. I've seen a lot of transfers from orientation days to randomly coming in and mingling with each other to now they're going in there all the time with each other, and I think that's super great.
I think the biggest resource I found at the Transfer Center has been the community that I found here. Coming as a transfer student, you only have so many years to acclimate, and I looked for other communities to get involved in, and so it's definitely a different environment, different set of people. I think that's why I found my community at the Transfer Center. I found more in common with the transfer community than like a freshman coming in.
So the Transfer Center as a whole is pretty much home for me. It's the one place on campus where I walk in and not have to explain what I am. Like, I'm a transfer student, because many times on campus I have to explain what being a transfer is, and then explain community college system, and then explain, oh, I took these classes, I'm actually really smart. But when I walk into the Transfer Center, it's just very, oh yeah, I got you. Like, I don't have to, there's no layer of having to explain myself. I don't need to explain myself to transfer students or in the Transfer Center. I just am.
Something I want transfers to know, something I wish I was told earlier, is we talk about imposter syndrome a lot. I didn't really know what I was doing here. So I think it's critical for students to, in their first few weeks, like take a look around before stuff gets too crazy with midterms, tests, or whatever you got going on, before it gets too crazy, and realize, you put in work, you're one of the best schools in the country, one of the best schools in the world or whatever, and realize like you made it, that's awesome, like enjoy your time here. Get involved with clubs on campus, get involved with the Transfer Center, get involved with whatever you can, because time goes by really quick. I've only been here, this is my fourth semester, and it feels like it's only my second or third, so take advantage of what you have here and really seek out to do everything you can.
I think what I would say about the Transfer Center is if you come to Berkeley and you don't find, especially as a transfer student, your community somewhere else, come to the Transfer Center. I think we're such a diverse group of people because there's different majors, different backgrounds, everyone has a different life story, but at the same time, it's so inclusive.
So now that we looked at what our Transfer Center is about, let's get into
My first experience with the
let's go ahead and get into what does a Transfer Center offer. So we offer academic advising. We currently have 3 academic advisors, specifically only for transfer students. So if a traditional student were to come into the center, unfortunately, they are not a transfer student, so we won't be able to help them in their needs. And we're currently hiring a 4th, so that's super exciting for us. We also offer transition courses, which we'll get into a little bit later on what they offer and what it entails. We also have a common space to study. So before this pandemic, we have a center, which is in the picture you see it there, where we offer like tables for people to study on, charging ports. If you need a charger for your laptop, you can rent that at the center. We have coffee for 25 cents. We have a couch for you to lay on. We'll have different types of events that are on throughout the semester for everyone to come, or for transfer students to come and find their community. Since we're on a pandemic, we have a virtual space now where students can come into the space and they can ask for different resources that they need, ask to set an appointment with our counselors. We also have peer advocate opportunities, which Gracia would get into a little bit later, and how that works and what that entails. And as well as starting point mentorship program, as it was mentioned in the video, it pairs community college students with UC Berkeley students. It would also be talked about a little bit later, as well as Transfer Insights. Transfer Insights pairs both students from UC Berkeley, first year transfers and second, third year, fourth year transfers, to help better navigate the UC system or Cal in general. And lastly, we recently launched a volunteer program. And so Gracia will also get into that a little bit later.
So this is a brief internal structure of how our Transfer Center works. So we have our director, underneath that our academic counselors. The most important part I want y'all to pay attention to is the bottom 2 tiers, which are completely student-led. So each academic counselor is in charge of a PAL, which is a peer advocate lead, and that's me and Angie are both peer advocate leads. each peer advocate lead runs their own team, and their team is composed of PAs, which are peer advocates, or students. And I'll get into kind of the difference, but I think this is a huge component into how our center works, is really giving students the voice, is putting them in those leadership positions to run these teams that basically run the center. Andrew, can you go to the next one, please? So these are some of the programs that are within the Transfer Center that peer advocate leads run. And that's, again, student positions. So we have the operations team, which if we were in person, they would run the scheduling for the front desk, the logistics of what we need there. Are we out of certain supplies that we need, like for coffee or cups and tea that we offer students? Do we need more chargers for computers? Do we need new chargers because we have new computers? Like, I don't know, Apple always changing their chargers. We have the events team, which helps coordinate all the student events, and even now virtually. So they come up with the events, they do the flyers for the events, and do all the logistics for that. We have the Transfer Insights Mentorship Program, SSS, which is a federally funded TRIO program. It's Student Support Services. The Volunteer Program, which I'll get into later. Outreach, which Angie's in charge of, and that team runs our social media platform, does different campaigns to keep us in the spotlight. And if we were on campus, they would also be doing tabling events. SPMP, which is Starting Point Mentorship, that I'll also talk about in a bit. So a peer advocate lead is a student position, and it's actually a paid internship. And we work about 10 hours a week. And it's a leadership position. So as I mentioned before, you are in charge of your team. You meet with your academic counselors on a weekly to bi-weekly basis to update them on how your team is doing and everything. You meet with your team individually, aside from meeting with your academic counselor, and to talk about the logistics that you have. So it's definitely, you have a lot of opportunity to brainstorm your own ideas and bring them to the table and have your team collaborate. We also, with this, have access to workshops, which the academic counselors do for us, and they're bi-weekly, and they're usually academic-based or career-based, where we work on our resumes, we work on our cover letters, we work on what kind of leader are you, how does your love language fit into your leadership styles, and things of that nature. The peer advocate position, Diana is a peer advocate, and she will talk about more her position later. You get 1 to 2 academic units for being a peer advocate. And depending on the units that you want to do, you work 3 to 6 hours a week. It's a collaborative position, which you work in a team, and the teams that I had mentioned earlier. And you also have access to the same career building workshops that the peer advocate leads have access to. The students that help run our teams kind of fit into 2 categories. So if you're not a peer advocate lead or a peer advocate, these are 2 other ways in which you can get involved internally in the Transfer Center. So the first ones are mentors. So the first mentor program is Starting Point Mentorship, and you get units for being a part of a mentor in this program, and it pairs UC Berkeley students with community college students. And you're kind of there to, you meet with them virtually now. If you were on campus, sometimes they are able to meet in person. You give them, encouraging motivational advice, how to apply to UC Berkeley, your experience, and give them resources on how to navigate the campus before they even get to campus. The next one is Transfer Insights, which is a mentoring program for returning transfer students, and they pair them with new transfer students, so that new transfer students coming in, especially as we mentioned before, maybe suffering from imposter syndrome, get paired with a transfer student that's already been there. So you're able to navigate these resources, because UC Berkeley does have a lot of resources, and sometimes it can be overwhelming in terms of which one fits me better. And that mentorship program helps with that. The last option that we just launched last semester is the volunteer program, which I'll get into more later, but it's an opportunity. It's low commitment, and it's an opportunity for you to get involved in the center and kind of get to learn how internally some of these other teams work without having to set such big commitments in case you're busy with schoolwork or whatever. So the volunteer program is students are able to, if you are not sure you want to be a part of the Transfer Center, you can't commit to the 3 to 6 hours, you don't know if you want to be a peer advocate lead yet, you can volunteer, you can apply to be a volunteer, and you tell us how many hours you can work a week. Maybe that's 1 hour, maybe that's 2 hours. And you also let us know, hey, I'm interested in helping this team, I'm interested in helping this team, and we note that. And the volunteer program meets bi-weekly. They also have access to some of the workshops, career building and academic workshops, and you're able to help like the operations team in scheduling virtual things, maybe upkeep on our calendar. The other, if you're a volunteer, you can also help sign up to help the events team and maybe help them when maybe we need more facilitators for certain events. We would call on our volunteer members who signed up to help events. Hey, I see you're available for 2 hours this week and we have this event, we need more people. You can help our outreach team, which is social media and projects. Last semester, we did a flyer building workshop in which we learned how to use some editing tools to make flyers, and the team made flyers for the outreach team. The last one would be the support team, in which you sign up and basically say, hey, I don't mind working in any team, put me where y'all need me. And this team is this part of the team kind of helps wherever we need help. Just to give you all an idea of what that is, right now, we are working on creating a temporary logo for our Transfer Insights team. And so we have a group of 3 students who are leading that team from the volunteer program with great editing skills in like Adobe and Photoshop, who are working to make that temporary logo.
And now I'm going to touch on our transition course that we offer for our incoming transfer students, otherwise known as LNS 198, Transitioning to Cal. So what is the transition course? The transition course is a 1-unit pass-no-pass course that's geared to help facilitate students transition to the research university, and it aims to foster community and offers exposure to campus resources and opportunities at Cal. So Grecia talked about the difference between the PALs and the PAs, and now I kind of want to talk about like what the responsibilities for a PAL and a PA look like in terms of a transition course. So in our transition course, we have our course facilitators, who are the people who facilitate the course, and they meet with our PALs and PAs to develop the course for that week, and also help with planning and who will be leading what discussions throughout the course. We also have our PAL, who oversees the group of PAs, and they lead weekly meetings with the PAs where we talk about how our course went for that week, and also for us to build that community within with our team. The PAs, we serve as student assistants in the course. As Grecia mentioned earlier, I serve as a PA, so I do get to serve as a student assistant in the course. As a student assistant, not only do I get to help facilitate the course, but I also get to participate in these group discussions with students and get to share my experiences with students, and really build that community with them so that they feel that they have someone that they can rely on at Cal while they're navigating their first semester there. And I just want to talk a little bit about the topics in the course curriculum that we offer. So one of the first topics that we do discuss is identity and belonging, where we explore what the transfer identity means, what imposter syndrome looks like for everybody, and othering and belonging at Cal. We also have our topic on study skills and time management, where we identify essential study skills and how to create a designated and productive space for online learning. And of course, what engagement in the virtual classroom looks like, given that we are attending Zoom University, basically. Wellness and restoration, where we explore skills for how to achieve mental clarity and identify core values that are important to our overall wellness and success. We also added a new topic, which is Intro to Social Justice, where we expose our students to the history of resistance at Cal, given that our institution is known for its activism and historical movements. So this one's really important to us. Preparing for finals, where we talk about skills and tools that could be helpful to our students as they prepare for final exams at Cal. And lastly, life after first semester. So helping students prepare for their future semesters at Cal, how to set goals for themselves, not just academically, but also personally. And really, to help them transition to schooling back on campus, given that, today, now we're doing school online, and we want to expose them to what that will look like in person. And we also do have guest presenters throughout the semester. So one of the ones that we have is the Student Tech Equity Program, otherwise known as STEP. And this program is really is a really great resource for our students because it loans students who are eligible with tech devices such as like personal hotspots, desktops, laptops, and really anything that might be essential to their online learning experience. We also have the Career Library and the UC Berkeley libraries that share resources and how to navigate these resources on campus. And we also have the Graduate Diversity Office. So we have exposing our students to what graduate school is, how to apply, and how to get there. And just a little bit about what student engagement in the course looks like. So we have group discussions right now through Zoom. We typically divide our students into small groups in breakout rooms on Zoom. And we put them into like small groups of 2 to 3 people. And really, this is an opportunity for them to get to share their experiences and their insights. And really, it helps them to develop that trust amongst each other, which is very important because, given that we are online, it's very difficult to build that community and, build those friendships, right? And so that's really what we want to be able to achieve with this course. Moving on with class participation, the student assistants, such as myself, we get to share our insights, our experiences throughout the course, but also we encourage students to participate as well so that they can, get familiarized with participating in larger group discussions so that when they transition to being back in person, they feel comfortable sharing in larger settings. We also have students participate in individual and group assignments. So on an individual basis, this might look like writing up a reflection on a reading that they were assigned. And for these group assignments, we are having we assign our students to do student interviews. And really what that is they have the opportunity to get to know another student, and they get to share their experiences, and they do get to write about what that experience was like for them. And then we also have students meet with the course facilitator. So this is really like a one-on-one check-in where students get to ask their course facilitator any questions, any advising, and really, for them to have that opportunity to build that community and that, that trust with their facilitator. And lastly, I encourage you all to connect with us on our social media platforms. Here we have our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter handles. So feel free to take a picture, take a screenshot, and follow us, add us, and we'd be more than happy to connect with all of you. And lastly, I just want to say thank you for holding the space for us to share about our transfer center, and we will now be holding space for a Q&A.
Yeah, thank you so much, Diana, Grecia, and Angie. I think we all learn here that the importance of a physical, or in this times a virtual space for transfer students is very needed, especially to center the voices of transfer students and making sure that they are leaders in their own community. I think that's amazing. And I really like how Grecia explained the basement of the transfer center is the students and their leadership. So thank you all for being here today. And I know we have some questions in the chat, so I want to open it up for questions like Diana mentioned.
There is a question that I've seen that how do we keep students engaged now that we're virtually? Someone had mentioned that they also now have a virtual space on their campus. So something that we do is that we do virtual events. So part of our events team is we create events for transfer students to attend. And the way that happens is that we send out a flyer. I also carry the newsletter. So the newsletter gets sent out to all transfer students on campus, letting them know of different resources at the center and different resources on campus, specifically for transfer students or in any way that we can help, whether that be COVID relief, BLM, anything that has to do with resources is being sent out. So maybe that's something that you can implement in your campus, is creating a newsletter so that it's sent out to a listserv of all students on campus, letting them know where the center is, if there's any events going on, things like that might be helpful.
I just want to say, though, that we are also struggling with engagement online versus of how we're in person. It is very different. So I think along with all the other centers, it is hard to get online engagement. On campus, people would come in just to sit in the center. You didn't even have to be doing homework. You would just come in and engage with us. And now it's we constantly have to try to interact with students. We've even been doing like takeovers on the Instagram to show like the more human side of some of our peer advocate leads in order to help with engagement, and that's helped. But I just wanted to say we are there with a lot of y'all in terms of struggling for engagement.
There is one question here from Matthew. They are asking if will you advise a second-year transfer to take a course like what you mentioned? There was also questions about the courses, the transfer courses that you all have for first-year transfer students. At UC Berkeley, we also have a similar course here at UT Austin, which we'll also be presenting in our next session. But I was wondering if Grecia, Angie, or Diana can talk a little bit more about the course and how they market it to students.
So an email, I believe, gets sent out to incoming transfer students coming in. So it's advertised to incoming transfer students as an option, and it kind of lays it out for you. And I think a big part of that is just the testimonies that we get from people who join the transition course. And I think that's something that Diana spoke to earlier. It's a classroom that offers units, but it's also a community. That's how I was introduced to the transfer center, is through that transition course.
Yeah, and sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and just like Grecia, for me, that's exactly how I started to be involved with the transfer center, through the transition course. I would recommend, or if a student who's a second-year transfer is interested in taking the course, definitely, go for it. I think that, even as a second-year transfer myself, I don't feel all that, ready to navigate the university, and so if I had not taken the course during my first year, I would have definitely enrolled in it, and now that it's my second year, definitely.
Yeah, just to go off of what Grace and Diana have already said, to address Matthew's question about being a second semester student. So unfortunately, that course is only offered for first semester students. So we highly encourage first semester students to take it. And we state that in the email as well. Because of that, because it's only offered to first years, we have a really high attendance rate. Sometimes there's a wait list of so many students, 300 students plus, trying to take the course. And sometimes we can't offer the course to everybody because it's so impacted. The course has been super helpful in like ways of letting people know of the center. Quick story, my first semester, I was starving first. Like it was like my first time living on my own, right? Without like my parents being so close to me. I wasn't eating I only ate like 3 times a week, and I didn't know about the different resources that were on campus and what was available to me. And through this course, I was able to know about the Basic Needs Center, which is part of the UC Berkeley system, and how it helps low-income, first-generation students and just students in general. And they let me know of CalFresh, which is basically like government assistance, and that's how I was able to get food. We also have a pantry, and so through this course, that's how I was able to know about a bunch of different resources that were on campus. And so somebody had asked what was the attendance like. So attendance is never an issue. However, it varies from like fall to spring because there's less admits in spring, so there's less cohorts in spring.
Thank you so much, Angie, for following up on that question. I think we are at time now, so I will be passing it to Jeff to wrap up this first session.
All right. Again, thank you so much, Angie, Gracia, and Diana. That was excellent. I think it sparked a lot of creativity. I was watching the chat the whole time. People were getting ideas about courses, about resources, about physical space, virtual space. So really appreciate the time and effort that y'all put in to this presentation. So a few kind of just closing ideas, what we hope you might take away from this first session is that transfer students do face unique challenges. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir there. Y'all definitely understand that. That transfer students bring important life and academic experiences to the receiving institutions. We mentioned this before in some of Dr. Tobolowsky's comments and Dr. Marling's comments as well. Transfer is a badge of honor. Y'all shared some really great points on why we should have more pride in being transfer students, and the process of transfer, it builds grit and resilience, and that needs to be celebrated in our transfer populations. And that you have the experience and the ability. So y'all are more than able, capable, knowledgeable to make the change that's needed on your campuses. After this session, we're about to close up, about to do our drawing for the pair of AirPods. We want to continue this conversation online. So if you're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, I think there's some activity from last year on Snapchat, please use the hashtag #TransferSummit. And then we want to make sure that you plan the work and work the plan. So we are going to provide some documents in our next email that you can access that help with some basics of project management. So project chartering and how to implement a new idea on your campus. So I know a lot of y'all were putting things in the chat about things you want to get started at your campus now and you don't know where to start. This will help you kind of think through those ideas. What are the problems you want to solve? What are some options on how to solve it? What are the constraints? What are the opportunities? Who do I need to contact on campus? What resources would I need? So I hope that these documents can be helpful, and we'll make those available after each session as well. Just a sneak preview to the March 29th and April 19th sessions. We have Veronica Famat and Catherine Hartman talking about belonging, culture, and community. We'll also have some students from our office, the Transfer Your Experience program at UT Austin, talking about how they incorporate a belonging lesson plan into their course for first-year transfer students. April 19th, we have Gloria Crisp, we have Dimple Jane, and we have two programs from UCLA that are going to come talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Transfer is an equity issue. Transfer is a diversity issue. We need more inclusivity for transfer students. And so very excited to have that group with us as well. And I don't want to leave before I say a huge thank you again to our two expert panelists, Janet Marling, Barbara Tobolowsky, to our student speakers, Angie, Diana, Gracia. Huge thank you to our team with TYE. If you received an email from us, it was probably because Angeles or Mandy, our undergraduate peer mentor who found you and reached out to you, And so we're really grateful to have them on our team to make a huge difference. So, but I'm going to invite Mandy now to kind of take over for a second, share her screen and help us out with our drawing for the AirPods. And I will say, she's gonna do a drawing. We'll need you to identify yourself. So if you're on Zoom, if your name gets drawn, please raise your hand, we'll find you. If you're on YouTube, please write something in the chat so we know that too.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and just go for it. All right, Elizabeth, are you on?
I saw her just recently. I hope she's still on.
Yes, I'm right here.
Oh, great.
Yay!
Yay!
Congratulations.
Thank you. Woo!
So yeah, we're really excited to be able to have a little incentive for those who come to each session and participate. And so really happy to send out that first pair. We'll connect with you offline to make sure that we get those to you. Again, we are very excited. So glad to have everyone who made the time today to participate. I really do hope that these conversations continue offline. A lot of email addresses were being shared. We'll get the listserv started so we can connect over email and then again on social media. So, but for now, we're gonna leave it there. Excited to have you back on March 29th. You'll receive emails about that in the coming weeks. In the meantime, you can certainly keep spreading the word. Registration will remain open. And yeah, until then, everyone, stay safe and thank you so much.